The first to be chosen, the autumn wind cut through Cedar Creek like a blade, carrying with it the scent of dying leaves and the promise of a harsh winter. Samuel Mackenzie pulled his coat tighter as he guided his horse through the muddy Main Street, his weathered hands steady on the reins despite the cold that had settled deep in his bones. At 42, Sam had grown accustomed to solitude. His ranch sat 15 miles outside town, a sprawling piece of land that had been in his family for 2 generations. After his parents passed, and his brother headed east for city life, Sam found himself the sole keeper of the Mackenzie legacy. The work was hard, the winters were long, and the silence in the old farmhouse had become his only companion. He hadn't planned on coming to town today, but supplies were running low and Mrs. Henderson at the general store had sent word that a shipment of winter goods had arrived. As he tied his horse to the post outside Henderson's, Sam noticed an unusual commotion near the town hall. A small crowd had gathered, their voices carrying an edge of excitement mixed with something darker. Another batch arrived on the morning train, he heard Miss Garrett saying to her neighbor. "Poor things. Some of them can't be more than 18. Sam's curiosity got the better of him. He made his way toward the crowd, pushing through until he could see what had drawn everyone's attention. On the steps of the town hall stood a man in a fine suit, speaking loudly to the assembled townspeople. Behind him, sitting on wooden benches, were 6 young women, each clutching a small bundle of belongings. "Ladies and gentlemen," the man was saying, "these fine young women have traveled far to find respectable homes and honest work. Each comes with references and skills that would benefit any household. The arrangements are simple. A payment of $50 covers their passage and ensures their placement in a good Christian home." Sam felt his stomach turn. He'd heard of such arrangements before. Women from back east, often orphaned or destitute, shipped west with promises of domestic work or marriage. Sometimes the promises were kept. Too often they weren't. The bidding began with enthusiasm. The first woman, a blonde with bright blue eyes, was quickly claimed by the banker's wife, who needed help with her growing family. The second, a brunette with a gentle smile, went to the preacher and his wife. One by one the women were spoken for, each transaction handled with the cold efficiency of a livestock auction. Sam watched in growing discomfort as the crowd began to thin. 5 women had been placed, leaving only one still sitting on the bench. She was small and slight, with auburn hair that caught the afternoon light despite being pulled back severely. Her dress was patched but clean, and she kept her eyes fixed firmly on her hands, which were folded in her lap. And finally, the man in the suit announced, his enthusiasm noticeably dimmed, "We have Miss Clara Dawson, 19 years old, experienced in household management, cooking and needlework. Sam noticed the way the man's expression had changed when presenting Clara, the subtle dismissal in his tone. He also noticed something else, a purpling bruise on the woman's left temple, barely visible beneath her hair. "Do I hear any offers for Miss Dawson?" The man called out. $40. 30. Silence stretched across the square. Clara's shoulders seemed to draw in on themselves, and Sam caught a glimpse of her face as she lifted her head slightly. Her eyes were green, the color of spring grass, but there was something broken in them that made his chest tight. $25. The man tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. "She's a hard worker, I assure you." Sam found himself stepping forward before he'd consciously made the decision. "I'll take her." The crowd turned to look at him, surprise evident on many faces. Samuel Mackenzie was known as a recluse, a man who kept to himself and his cattle. The idea of him taking on a household assistant was unexpected. "Excellent," the man exclaimed, relief flooding his features. "That'll be $50, Mr. Mackenzie, and I said I'd take her, not buy her." Sam's voice carried a steel that made several people step back. "I'm offering Miss Dawson employment at my ranch. Fair wages, room and board, and the freedom to leave if she chooses." The man's smile faltered. Well, there's still the matter of her passage costs and placement fee. Sam reached into his coat and pulled out his money pouch, counting out $50 in bills. Here's your fee. But understand this, Miss Dawson is free to make her own choices from this moment forward. He turned to Clara, who was looking at him with a mixture of surprise and wariness. Miss Dawson, I'm Sam Mackenzie. I have a ranch outside town that could use help with cooking and household management. The work is honest, the pay is fair, and you'd have your own room in the main house. Would you be interested in discussing the position? Clara stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether this was some kind of trick. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but clear. Yes, Mr. Mackenzie, I would be interested in discussing it. The transaction was completed with minimal fuss, though Sam noticed the way the man in the suit kept glancing nervously at Clara, as if afraid she might say something. When the paperwork was signed, Sam offered Clara his arm. My wagon's just down the street, he said gently. We can collect your things and head out to the ranch. It's about an hour's ride. As they walked away from the crowd, Clara finally spoke again. Why did you? My mother used to say that sometimes the thing that's hardest to choose is the thing that needs choosing most. He glanced at her sideways. Besides, I've been alone out there for 3 years now. Could use the company. The ride to the ranch passed in comfortable silence. Clara sat beside Sam on the wagon seat, her small bundle of belongings clutched in her lap. She seemed to relax slightly as they left the town behind, and Sam noticed her looking around with genuine interest at the countryside. It's beautiful, she said softly, as they crested a hill that gave them a view of the valley below. So open. Different from back east? Sam asked. Very different. She was quiet for a moment. I've never seen so much sky. When they reached the ranch, Sam helped Clara down from the wagon and showed her around. The main house was larger than she'd expected, built of sturdy logs with a wide front porch. It was clearly well maintained, but had the indefinable emptiness of a place where only one person lived. The kitchen's through here, Sam said, leading her inside, and there's a room off the back that would be yours. It's got a good window and a fireplace. Clara followed him through the house, taking in details. The furniture was well made but sparse, and everything was scrupulously clean. In the kitchen she noticed shelves lined with preserves and dried goods, clearly the work of someone who planned ahead, but cooked only for necessity. Mr. Mackenzie, she said finally, stopping in the middle of the kitchen. I need to know what you expect from me, what my duties would be. She hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. And whether you expect anything beyond household work. Sam turned to face her fully, and she saw nothing but honesty in his dark eyes. I expect you to help keep the house running, cooking, cleaning, maybe helping with the kitchen garden come spring. In return, you'll have room and board and $30 a month. As for anything else, he shook his head firmly. I'm not looking for a wife, Miss Dawson. I'm looking for someone to help make this place feel less like an empty shell. Something in Clara's posture relaxed at his words. And if I want to leave, then you leave. I'll even drive you back to town myself, and make sure you have enough money to get wherever you want to go. That first evening, Clara prepared dinner while Sam finished his evening chores. When he came in from the barn, he found the kitchen filled with the kind of smells that hadn't graced his house in years. Clara had somehow transformed his simple stores into a meal that made his mouth water. I hope you don't mind, she said, looking suddenly uncertain. I found some herbs growing wild behind the house, and there were vegetables in the root cellar. Mind? Sam sat down at the table, which Clara had set with his mother's good dishes. I haven't had a meal like this since my mother passed. Thank you. As they ate, they talked carefully, each learning small things about the other. Clara had grown up in an orphanage in Pennsylvania. After her parents died in a factory fire, she'd been working as a domestic servant when the opportunity arose to come west. Sam spoke briefly of his family, his parents, and the brother who'd chosen city life over ranch life. "What happened to your face?" Sam asked gently when he noticed her unconsciously touching the bruise on her temple. Clara's hand stilled. "The man who was supposed to employ me in Denver, he wasn't what his letters claimed to be. When I tried to leave, he disagreed with my decision." Sam's jaw tightened. "He hit you, among other things." Clara's voice was matter-of-fact, but Sam could see the tension in her shoulders. "I managed to get away, but I had nowhere to go. That's how I ended up with Mr. Carlyle and his arrangement." "You're safe here," Sam said quietly. "I give you my word." Over the following weeks, Clara settled into life at the ranch with surprising ease. She threw herself into the work of managing the household, and gradually the empty house began to feel like a home. She mended curtains, organized the pantry, and cooked meals that made Sam look forward to coming inside at the end of long days. But it was the small things that struck him most. The way she hummed while she worked, the way she'd saved the last of the autumn flowers and put them in a jar on the kitchen table, the way she'd found his mother's old books and dusted them off, placing them where they could be seen and enjoyed again. Clara, for her part, found herself cautiously hopeful for the first time in years. Sam was exactly what he'd presented himself to be, a decent man who treated her with respect and kindness. He never raised his voice, never made demands beyond the work they'd agreed upon, and never looked at her with anything other than genuine friendliness. One evening in late November, as the first snow began to fall, Clara was darning socks by the fire when Sam came in from checking on the cattle. She looked up as he stamped the snow off his boots. "Storm's coming in," he said, hanging his coat by the door. "We might be snowed in for a few days." "Are you worried about the cattle?" Clara asked, setting aside her mending. "They'll be fine. Got them in the near pasture where they can get to the shelter." Sam settled into his chair by the fire, accepting the cup of coffee Clara handed him. "It's you I'm worried about." Clara looked surprised. "Me? Why?" "Being stuck here alone with me. If it bothers you, I can sleep in the barn until the weather clears." Clara was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the firelight. "Mr. Mackenzie, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you really take me on that day?" "The truth." Sam was quiet for so long that Clara began to think he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft. "I was 12 when my parents took in a girl from town. Her name was Emma, and she was maybe 6. Her father had died and her stepmother didn't want her around. They put her up for basically the same kind of arrangement you were in." Clara waited, sensing there was more. "Nobody wanted Emma because she had a club foot. Made her walk with a limp, but my mother saw her sitting there getting passed over, and she couldn't stand it. Took Emma in and gave her a home." Sam stared into the fire. "Emma stayed with us for 3 years before she married the school teacher. But those 3 years, she changed our whole family. Made us better." He looked at Clara then, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "When I saw you sitting there watching everyone else get chosen while you got passed over, I remembered Emma, and I thought about how my mother always said that the people who get left behind are often the ones who have the most to give." "What happened to Emma?" Clara asked softly. "She and her husband moved to California. They have 4 children now. She still writes at Christmas." Sam smiled slightly. "Always signs her letters Emma Mackenzie Thompson because she says we'll always be her first family." Clara felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "So you didn't take me on because you needed help?" "Oh, I needed help," Sam said quickly. This place was falling apart without a woman's touch. But no, that's not why I stepped forward. He paused. I stepped forward because I knew what it felt like to watch someone get overlooked, and I couldn't let it happen again. The snow fell for 3 days, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Clara and Sam settled into an easy routine, working together to keep the house warm and comfortable. They played cards in the evenings, read aloud from his mother's books, and talked about everything from farming techniques to philosophy. It was during those 3 snowbound days that Clara began to understand what Sam had meant about the house feeling like an empty shell. With the two of them working together, laughing together, and simply being together, the house came alive in a way that had nothing to do with the physical work Clara had been doing. On the 3rd evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Clara made a decision. "Sam," she said, using his first name for the first time, "I want to tell you something." He looked up from the book he'd been reading. "All right. When I was sitting on that bench in town watching everyone else get chosen, I felt like I was disappearing, like I was becoming nothing." She twisted her hands in her lap. "But when you stepped forward and said you'd take me, it wasn't just that someone had chosen me. It was that you made me feel like I was worth choosing." Sam set down his book, giving her his full attention. "And then you said I was free to make my own choices, and you've kept that promise every day since." Clara's voice grew stronger. "So I want you to know that I choose to be here, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because this feels like home in a way nowhere ever has before." Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Clara, you should know, you weren't the first person to be chosen that day. You were the only person worth choosing." The spring that followed brought changes to the ranch that went beyond the greening of the pastures and the birth of new calves. Clara planted a kitchen garden that would have made Sam's mother proud, and she and Sam worked together to repair and improve the outbuilding. But the biggest change was in Sam himself. The lonely, solitary man who had driven to town that autumn day was gone, replaced by someone who laughed regularly, who looked forward to coming inside at the end of the day, and who had begun to plan for a future that extended beyond simple survival. Clara bloomed as well. The fearful, wounded woman who had sat on that bench was still there, but she was wrapped now in confidence and joy. She corresponded with friends back east, telling them about her new life. She learned to ride Sam's gentlest horse, and began accompanying him on some of his ranch work. She even started teaching reading to some of the children in town on Sunday. It was on a warm day in May, as they worked together in the garden, that Sam finally said what had been growing in his heart all winter. "Clara," he said, pausing in his planting, "I need to tell you something." She looked up from the tomato seedlings she was transplanting, a smudge of dirt on her cheek. "What is it?" "I know I said I wasn't looking for a wife when you came here, and I meant that. I wasn't, but things change." He set down his tools and faced her fully. "You've changed everything about this place, about my life, and I've come to realize that what I feel for you goes way beyond gratitude or friendship." Clara's hands stilled in the soil. "Sam, I'm not asking you to marry me," he said quickly. "Not yet. I'm just asking if you think there might be room in your heart for something more than what we have now, because if there is, I'd like to court you properly, give you the choice to say yes or no to something real." Clara sat back on her heels, looking at this man who had given her back her life and her sense of worth, the man who had seen her when she felt invisible, who had treated her with respect and kindness, who had become her dearest friend and the center of her world. "Sam Mackenzie," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "I thought you'd never ask." Their wedding took place in September, exactly 1 year after that fateful day in town. Emma Thompson traveled all the way from California to attend, along with her husband and children. The whole town turned out for the celebration, including many who remembered the day Sam had stepped forward to claim a woman no one else wanted. As Clara walked down the aisle of the small church, wearing a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Sam had brought her from town, she caught sight of their reflection in the window. She saw a woman who was loved, valued, and chosen, not as a last resort, but as a first choice. During the reception, old Mrs. Henderson approached Clara with tears in her eyes. "My dear," she said, "I've never seen a happier bride. You just glow with joy." Clara smiled, looking across the room to where Sam was talking with some of the other ranchers, his face animated in a way she remembered being absent that first day they'd met. "Mrs. Henderson," Clara said, "I want to tell you something my husband said to me once. He said, I wasn't the first person to be chosen that day. I was the only person worth choosing, and that's how I feel about him too. Not because no one else would have him, but because no one else could possibly be as perfect for me as he." As the evening wound down and the guests began to head home, Sam and Clara stood on the porch of their house now truly, watching the stars come out over the ranch. "Any regrets?" Sam asked, wrapping his arms around his wife. Clara leaned back against his chest, thinking about the long journey that had brought her here. The orphanage, the years of domestic work, the terrible experience in Denver, the humiliation of that auction, and finally the moment when a kind man had stepped forward and changed everything. "Only one," she said finally. Sam tensed slightly. "What's that?" Clara turned in his arms, smiling up at him. "I regret that it took me 19 years to find my way home." As they stood there under the vast Montana sky, holding each other close, Clara reflected on the strange journey that had brought them together. She had started as a woman no one wanted, overlooked and discarded, but Sam had seen something in her that others had missed, and in choosing her he had given her the greatest gift possible, the knowledge that she was worthy of love. And Sam, who had thought he was destined for a life of solitude, had discovered that sometimes the best things come disguised as the choices no one else wants to make. In taking a chance on a woman others had passed by, he had found not just a wife, but a partner, a best friend, and the missing piece of his soul. Years later, when their own children would ask about how their parents met, Clara would tell them the story of the day she felt invisible, and the man who chose to see her, and she would always end the story the same way. "Your father didn't rescue me that day. He simply recognized what I was worth, and gave me the chance to rescue myself. And that, my dears, is what real love looks like." The Mackenzie Ranch prospered over the years, blessed not just with good cattle and fertile land, but with the laughter of children, the warmth of friends, and the love of two people who had found in each other everything they had never dared to hope for. And every year on the anniversary of their first meeting, Sam would present Clara with a small gift, and repeat the words that had become their private tradition: "Thank you for being the first to be chosen." And she would always reply, "Thank you for doing the choosing." Because sometimes, the most beautiful love stories begin, not with love at first sight, but with one person having the courage to see value where others see only emptiness, and another person having the strength to believe they are worthy of being seen.